And I will always remember when I met my mission president. He's probably about twice as tall as I am. That's an exaggeration, but he's like 6'5", huge guy, deep voice, and he just looks intimidating. But I could tell that this was like my boss for the next 2 years. This was the person that I need to look to for guidance for the next 2 years. I remember that being a distinct impression. If you have a trainer that is a native speaker, I would urge you to be patient and loving and not get too frustrated with the differences between you two, because there is just a fundamental gap in understanding of basic things for people from different cultures. My trainer was from Brazil, and he had never dealt with an American before, and it was hard to really kind of get that in sync with each other. I ended up being transferred before we worked out real well, and I had a second trainer, and that's where I decided when I had my second trainer is I was just going to try and be loving and understanding and like make sure I wasn't being belligerent, and it was one of the best companionships I had with a Brazilian elder with my second trainer. He was awesome. So just a little info about the mission. So you basically Ceará is most of what you guys cover. It's split in half between the Fortaleza mission and the Fortaleza East mission. As you can guess, our mission kind of takes up the east side. It's long and skinny, so you can travel a very long way and still be in the mission. I ended up serving in Fortaleza, but there's lots of countryside cities as well that you'll probably serve in and that I did serve in. Like Araripina, Pindoretama, Barbalha. I know they're hard names, right? Aracati, Salgueiro. I could just talk a little bit about a couple of those. People talk about food all the time. I'll talk about food. So common dish is rice and beans. South American mission, that's how it goes. You get rice and beans. In Fortaleza, if you're in poorer parts, you will usually get some beef and chicken with rice and beans as a typical lunch. But also kind of particular to that area is there are some dishes that are particular to that area. One is called buchada, and they basically take an ox stomach and they fill it with the intestines and the insides of the ox and with rice and a sauce and stuff, and they sew it up and they cook it for hours and then they eat it. And I honestly couldn't do it. I couldn't do it, but I couldn't make myself try it. But they always said if you cook it right, it's delicious. So I would encourage you to try it if you can. I did try something called panelada, which is basically that, but in like stew form. And that was, I'm going to be honest, that was decent. It was not bad. I'm pretty adventurous with eating, so that was pretty good. Once they gave us, they called it tripa frita. It was pieces of fried intestine, and they'd cut it up into pieces and fry it like a French fry, and they'd give you a bowl, and you'd eat it. And I didn't know what they were, and I was like, "Yeah, this is great." And they were like, "Yeah, that's intestine," and I was, "Oh, it's good." And I kept eating, but after a little while, I had to stop because I was like, "Okay, maybe I can't do this." What other foods? Fruit. You are going to get lots of fruit and juice in Ceará, in Fortaleza, because there are so many types of fruit. I would try everything, and honestly, I'm telling you, you got to try it. If you go there, you have to try all the fruit. Jamba, jaca, pitomba, pitaya, siriguela. None of these names make sense, but if you hear of a fruit and someone gives it to you to try it, just try it. You can't lose anything. It's awesome. And they make the best juices and like smoothies there as well. Like they call them vitaminas. They're vitamins. It's just a smoothie. It's awesome. They're so good. And while you're there, you have to try the acai. That's been a trend around Utah lately. Like they have the acai bowls, but it's not as good as the Amazon ones, as my Amazonian companions would tell me. But it's pretty good in Fortaleza. It's like almost nothing better at the end of a day of working the streets than like a bowl of acai. Another thing about snacks there, so they sell like wafer cookies, like the wafer cookies in like these packs in the tons of different flavors. They're delicious. I love them. And they sell like kind of cream sandwich cookies as well in like sleeves, and everyone eats those. It's like the snack that everyone eats. And it actually got so bad to a point where our mission president banned us from eating the cookies because missionaries were eating too many cookies and like not eating enough real food, that they were getting unhealthy. But those are like the snack. Get plenty of those while you're there. Just don't overdo it because you need energy and real food and stuff like that. But I love those. I had a hard time adjusting to Brazilian culture. They're very they're not rude. They're very abrupt sometimes and like goofy in your face, like kind of do what they want kind of deal. But at the same time, they are so. It's to an American, if we look at it with our own eyes, they seem inconsiderate, but they are so caught up in how other people feel sometimes that they want to make that they're the most considerate sometimes. I have had Brazilian companions that like would go out of their way to make sure, maybe not that the house was clean or that the dishes were done or whatever, but like to make sure I felt like we were in a companionship. Does that make sense? I don't know. I'm having trouble articulating it. You always hear this about South American missions, but they are loving people, and they will take care of you. And that's the thing I love most about the culture. And honestly, I miss the reckless fun-loving of that culture. There's one time we were cleaning a house. We were in a house full of, it was 4 companionships. No, it was 3 companionships, I think. Or 2, yeah, it was 3 companionships. And we were cleaning the house, and there you have to like throw water on the floor to clean the house, and my companion just takes a bucket, like a 5-gallon bucket of water, and dumps it on one of the other elders, and that then ensued a gigantic water fight, and everyone was soaked. It was just so reckless with our time and everything, but it was so fun. I think it's a good way to describe a lot of their cultures, like just reckless, fun-loving, and I love that. It was so funny. Fortaleza is the big main city. It was I'm from like a little town out east, and getting to Fortaleza it was mind-blowing how big it was. It was intense and loud and noisy and smelly, and I was getting thrown off, and I was miserable the first day I was there. I'm not gonna lie, it was one of the hardest adjustments I've ever made. But then you get to know the people there, and I'm not gonna lie, it's a big city. There's some rude people, but the Brazilian people are so loving and caring, and they made that city home for me. You get a lot more flagrant poverty in Fortaleza a lot of the time, or rather, there's a very drastic difference between the poorer sectors and the wealthy sectors. A lot of missionaries prefer to work in the poorer sectors because they're a little more humble. But yeah, there's a lot of poverty in Fortaleza. They call them favelas instead of ghettos. But weather's hot. It's always hot in Fortaleza. In any city that I talk about, there's going to be hot weather. Doesn't rain a ton except for like from January to March. It rains a little bit. You will live in generally if you're in the city, you'll live in some decent housing. But don't expect like American style homes because, like I said, different culture, different life. And honestly, those houses have become homes, so it's really not that bad. There's so many buses. You will take buses everywhere. Be prepared to like buses if you don't like buses right now, because you need to learn to like buses. I took buses almost every day in certain areas. There were other times we didn't have enough money, so we walked. But there were other times where we needed to take a bus to get to our area for zone conferences, district meetings, mission conferences, get to the mission office. It was always a bus. You had to take a bus. Taxis are too expensive, so just be expecting that, and it's kind of a blast. Just it gets crowded and a little invasive with the number of people they put on the bus, so make sure you secure your own space and make sure your companion's with you before you get on the bus. I saw so many companionships where one companion got on the bus and the other one was left behind, and the bus left and the companionships were split up. It was funny because they ran after the bus, but avoid that if you can. Second city I served in was Pindoritama, and it's a little secluded outside of Fortaleza, but that was like my home. I was there for 9 months, and the people there, like the ward there, became basically my family. They were wonderful people and loving and caring. There, we lived near these 3 sisters. Only two were members of the church. I don't know if I'm allowed to mention their names. They can edit it out if they don't want to put it in there, but it was Irbeni, Irhleni, and Irhlani. And I remember them to this day. I don't keep in contact with them enough. I should. But they would feed us every night. We'd just stop by and like they'd give us some dinner. They would give us lunch if our lunch appointment fell through, because you have lunch appointments in Brazil. You don't get dinner appointments. They were there to like help out with activities or teaching investigators. They were just always there, and they were awesome. And the bishop there was fantastic as well. Oh man, there's so many people to go through. I could list all their names, and hopefully if you guys go there, you'll meet them and talk to them. But they became a family to me, and I love and appreciate every single one of those people. Pindoretama was a home for me. It's basically one street, and there's one place where you get milkshakes, and we'd go there every week just to unwind and get a milkshake. Pizza's a big deal too. Getting a Brazilian pizza once a week just to like unwind. If you ever go to Pindoretama, make sure you don't get discouraged by how small it is, because there's always people to find. I baptize a lot in that area. So don't be afraid to look into neighbors and stuff like that. So the wildlife in Brazil is kind of nuts. First I'll tell a story from a friend of mine from my district group, and then I'll tell a couple of mine. So I had this friend that came on the mission. We met in the MTC, and we went to the same mission. And he was there. We never really were companions or anything, but we were in the same district a couple times. And there was this one time they were teaching this family, him and his companion, and the doors there are like half doors, like the bottom half is separated from the top half and like swings separately or whatever. So the bottom half was closed, but the top half was open. And so my friend, this elder, is like just sitting there, whatever, like looking at the investigator, and he looks over, and on the top of the door there's a little monkey. So they're called soins. My pronunciation is probably off. But they're like little lemur monkeys. They're like this big, literally, and they have this tail and claws, and they're really cute. But so there's this little monkey that is perched there staring at my friend, and he's like, okay, whatever, and he tries to pay attention to the lesson again, and he like eventually wanders off. It's hard, it's hot, he's tired, it's after lunch. He like drifts off, and there's the monkey, but it's like 5 feet closer. It's like near his arm now. And he's like, oh, that's creepy. But then he like, okay, pay attention, and he looks at the investigator, and he's talking to him and teaching, and he looks again, and he like kind of turns, and the monkey's like right here, and he's just like, what is going? He's kind of fascinated because it's a cute little monkey, but the monkey's like right here, and he's like, oh, it's so cute, and this monkey opens its mouth, shrieks, and like bites his ear. It's so hard that it bleeds, and he's like freaking out and screaming. He had to go to the hospital, which I guess it's not funny, but it was really funny at the time. It still is. So avoid the monkeys. They bite. They also will eat crackers straight from your hand. They're really, just don't let them get too close. They'll bite you. Also, beware of the insects. They're a lot bigger in Brazil. I'm going to be honest, I didn't believe it until I got there, but the grasshoppers are like this big. And they will chase you if they're mad at you. We had one chase us for like a couple blocks before I gave up. But they're scary. Also, spiders. It's scary. Just make sure your mission office is supplied with like pest poison and stuff like that. Because one time we walked in to our house and there's a spider like this big on our window. Like the cover of the window, the shutter or whatever. And we sprayed the heck out of that thing because none of us were touching it. It was huge. But you beware of that. So there's all sorts of those kinds of spiders. When I was like older in the mission, I had a lot of new missionaries come and ask me, how do I get better in the language, or how do I learn the language? If you have background in Spanish, Portuguese has a lot of similarities to Spanish. But don't let that become overconfident for you, because the region that you're going to is so packed full of slang that even other Brazilians sometimes have trouble understanding it. I mean, there's one term, it's called rebolar na mata. In every other part of Brazil, rebolar means to dance. It's a verb to dance. And na mata means like weeds. So in Brazil, they say rebolar na mata. If anyone else in Brazil would say, oh, that means to dance in the weeds, which doesn't make sense anyway. But for the region where you're going, Ceará, Fortaleza, if you say rebolar na mata, it means throw it away. And like, it's just so full of these little quirks that be prepared to go with an open mind and an inquisitive mind to learn all these different ways to speak. Outside of that, I'm going to be honest with you guys, the gift of tongues is real. And if you fully put forward your heart and mind and strength into learning the language to glorify God and to make sure that you can communicate with his children in Brazil, he will make you heard and make you understood. And you'll learn the language. Have faith in the gift of tongues. That's the best I can give you. Other than that, read your scriptures in the language and don't be afraid to talk to people. Make friends with the Brazilians and talk to them because that is going to help you. That's what helped me learn a lot. And another tip about speaking the language, if you're a Spanish speaker, a lot of the Spanish speaking happens like at the tip of your tongue. That's not the case in Portuguese. It happens deeper back in your throat. So slow down and try to enunciate really well. It helps like stick a pencil in your mouth and try to speak around it, and that makes you enunciate it really well. In Pindoretama, that place I was talking about with one road, from like January to March or whatever, there'd be these huge storms, and we'd always get caught in them, and we'd show up drenched like rats. And there was this one time, this is an example of like Brazilian kindness. We were like running through this storm. We couldn't even see more than 3 feet in front of us, where we hear this yell from this house to the side. It's a bit of a poor house, but they're like, hey, come over here. And we're like, oh, okay. And we're thinking, of course, we're missionaries. We're like, teach a lesson. So they like call us in and like let us drive off. We're like, hey, can we talk to you about Christ? That's what we do. And they let us. And afterwards, we're like, okay, we got to go. And they're like, no, don't leave. It's raining. We're like, oh, in my mission, it was a big thing to work hard and to work hard all the time and to not rest, which is good. I encourage that. But because God will give you strength so you do not faint. But they're like, okay, well then take our umbrellas. They gave us umbrellas to go out into the storm to keep teaching about Christ, and that was touching. That was awesome. We brought them back later and taught them again, and they were just good people. I was a zone leader at the time. And we were on splits. The American was with my Brazilian companion in their area, and there's a Guatemalan, Elder Donis, that was he was with me in my area. And we were walking around, we ate lunch, we were going through everywhere, and it was Christmas Eve that day. And we were knocking doors and teaching lessons, typical missionary stuff. And when he was like, Elder, I don't feel very good. I'm like, oh, well. Like, how bad is it? He's like, I'm all right. We went a little longer, and he's like, Elder, my stomach is, like, not good. And I was like, oh, shoot. So we called the mission vice president, Sister Fusco, and told her about it, and he had some previous health things where he had to get it taken care of. So we went to, it was like it's called a posto de saúde. It's like a little outpost for emergency health matters. So that's where we went, and the wait at those places is ridiculously long. It takes super long to get attended, and I wasn't allowed in there with him. So I was a little hesitant about that, but I was like, okay, he's got to go in, that's fine. So we checked him in and put him in line to wait or sit down in there, and I had to wait outside where there's some benches hanging out, and I was like, okay, I'll wait outside. And so I was waiting out there, and we were there for hours and hours and hours. About an hour in, I was like, well, if I'm going to sit here, I'm going to be productive, and I'm going to read my scriptures. And I was like, it's Christmas Eve. I'm going to read about the birth of Christ. So I opened up Luke and started reading about the birth of Christ and the wise men and everything. And I was like, that was the year that the He's the Gift initiative was released by the church, and we were encouraged to share that message and have the little cards. Anyone that served at that time knows those little cards that we had to give out. But so I had this super strong urge to like talk to people about this and tell them that Christ is the gift that God gave us. So I looked up and I noticed 3 or 4 people kind of like sitting around me, and I've never been this like outgoing in my life, but I just like look at the person. I was like, "Hey, do you know the story of Christ's birth?" And they kind of looked up at me like, "What?" And I was like, "Do you know the story of how Christ was born?" And they were like, well, "Not really." And I was like, "Oh, well, cool. Would you like me to tell you about it?" And they were like, "Yeah, sure. It's Christmas Eve." So I was like, "Right on." And I started explaining, and I was so brash when I was in the mission. It's kind of crazy. I think it's the mantle. But as I explained about Christ, about the inception of Christ, like when Mary found out that she was going to have Christ and the process that they went through in having him, and the wise men coming and everything, I noticed a couple people around us were like looking up and kind of looking, and I'd stop the story and be like, "Hey, come over here. We're going to talk about Christ's birth." And I was like, I'd always bring them back, and then I'd summarize and keep going. And while I taught people about Christ being born and the miracle that it was and what it really meant for us, I got this super strong confirmation. I'd like to say the Spirit descended on me that Christ really is the Son of God, and that he was sent to this earth for a mission. The mission to save us and to atone for our sins. And that is what I shared with those people at the very end of that conversation. And I don't think there are very few times I've felt the Spirit that powerful. So at the end, I said, "Okay, guys, I have 3 of these. Here's the gift cards for each of you. And I want you guys to go on, look at this, and then give out these cards to other people so that they can feel the same thing we're feeling here." And they said, "Yeah," and like I could tell there was a difference for them. I never saw those people again. But that Christmas Eve, I knew that I had made a difference in someone's life. And I don't know if another missionary taught them, or if they found a member, or if they still have yet to have that opportunity. But like, I know that they were affected, and that they were closer to Christ because I was able to open my mouth and preach about him on Christmas Eve. So don't let those moments that the Spirit is prompting you to pass, especially on days like Christmas Eve, because that was the best Christmas experience I've ever had. I wanted to speak directly to the people like the pre-missionaries that are going to Missão Brazil Fortaleza East. Go with an open heart ready to be filled. I know that it's totally true. It doesn't matter where you go as long as you're called. But if you are called to that mission, you're meant to go there. And you are going to change in the best ways possible. I always hate it when people are like, "Oh, my second home is where I was on my mission," but like, or like, "I left a piece of my heart in my mission." Like that bugs me sometimes. But I'm gonna be honest. That place changed me, and I saw miracles on my mission there. And there's not a day that goes by that I think about going back to see those people that I made connections with, and to see if I can lift them up again the way I did while I was on my mission. Cherish the time you're there on your mission, because you will be the catalyst in other people's lives that will completely turn them around. There are 2 women that I baptized on my mission whose lives completely changed because, well, more people than that, but I always think about these people. Francisca Alda and Dauris Edge. I was so grateful that I was able to teach them and see the way that they bettered their lives. It's not that I really did much. I just introduced the principles and the gospel to them and told them how to follow Christ, and they seized that and turned their lives around with Christ's help. And I am so grateful to have witnessed that. And I think that every person should experience that as well.